Everybody doing all right this morning? Man, can we give it up for our youth who were involved in service? Y'all can do better than that. They did an amazing job. Amazing job singing, amazing job operating the camera. I think all around, phenomenal time. When I came to faith at the age of 19, one thing that I fell in love with Jesus was the fact that how intergenerational he is. By that I mean the fact that when I was 19, I knew that my friends could grab hold of faith and experience a changed life. But I also knew my parents could grab hold of faith and experience the changed life. So I truly believe that in this moment, if you step in and if you lean into Jesus with me for a little bit longer, you can find hope and faith that will change your life. I don't know which spectrum of faith you are in right now. I don't know if you got full faith. I don't know if you got no faith. I don't know if you know Jesus to the extreme or don't know Jesus at all. But I promise you, if you lean into this moment with me, you can meet Jesus. Your life can be changed. You can find hope. You don't have to be discouraged. You can be encouraged. You can find a life that God has for you. I'm going to pray. I'm going to jump into our service. Can you grab the hand of the person next to you? God, we love you. We thank you for just meeting us in these moments, God. We thank you for being a God that creates us, speaks to us, that redeems us, God. We thank you for being a God that speaks to our hearts and speaks to our brokenness and doesn't allow us to live life alone. We ask that you let us feel your love in these moments. We need your encouragement, God. We're heavy from life. We know your love restores, rebuilds, and encourages. So rebuild us, encourage us, and bring to life the dead areas in our heart. We love you, God. We ask all these things in your name. Amen. You may be seated. So the other day I woke up, it was Memorial Day, I woke up and I had this great idea, right? And you know what this idea was? I was gonna go for a run. And if you know me, I'm not a runner. And oftentimes if you've done any kind of working out with me at all, you've probably heard me tell you how much I just dislike cardio. But I had this idea. I'm gonna go for a run. I don't know why, because I just feel like, you know what? Hey, maybe I don't got a gym I can go to later, but I wanna make sure I get my workout in. And so I ran about a mile. And after a mile in, I go, this is pretty easy. Let me challenge myself. So I got to 2 miles. I go, you know what? I still don't feel like I'm working out hard enough. Let me challenge myself again. And so I end up running a 5K, which is the very first 5K I ever ran in my entire life. And I was excited about it. So you know what I did? I woke up the next day and said, I'm going to do this again. I don't know. The Lord must be working on me. I don't know. And so I ran it again. And so I go, what would happen if I challenged myself and ran a 5K every day? Because I really believe that human potential is limitless, and we really are, we put borders around our own lives. We shut our own potential in. And so I decided to run. And so about 7 days in to my 5K a day challenge, my knee started hurting me, right? And my knee was really really bad. It hurt me really bad. But I really believed growing up there was a major difference between injury and pain. A lot of us don't believe that because a lot of us, the moment we feel pain, we step back down. But I really believe there's a big difference between sitting on the sidelines because you got pain and sitting on the sidelines because you got injury. You know, sometimes life is going to bring you pain, but pain doesn't mean sit down. Sometimes pain means to step up and lean into it. Life is going to hurt sometimes, but that doesn't mean sit out and you're done. It means no, to step up and move forward. So I believe there's a big difference between injury and pain. And but I was injured. I was injured, guys. The reason I know this is because I was running with a friend of mine on day 8, and my knee went like this. And they'd go, Aaron, are you okay? I go, I'm good. I'm good. I do this for fun. This is 7 days in a row. And they go, no, you're not good, Aaron. You're limping right now. I go, no, I'm good. And so I tried to run again, and it did it again. I'm like, I'm good. They're like, Aaron, stop. You're going to hurt yourself. And I go, I got this. I'm only 27. I have good knees. So I was wrong. Well, know how I know I was wrong? When I got home, I collapsed on my carpet. And I laid there, and I couldn't even bend my knee out. And I laid there, and I cried out to God. And I go, God, this is must how Vernon feels with his one bad knee. But then I go, God, I need you to redeem my knee. But it didn't work. I was in denial. I thought I had good knees, but I was wrong. I was really injured. I thought it was just the pain, but it was an injury. I was wrong. And have you ever been in denial before? The funny thing about being in denial is you really don't know that you're in denial until you realize you're wrong, until you get some like repercussions from it. Denial is a funny thing. And so as I was laying there, I began to think about how many times I've been in denial. And how many times have my staying in denial has really caused me a lot more damage than me just accepting the reality. Instead of me just being like, look, my knee is bad, I'm going to just stretch it out, and I'm going to take some days off. I was like, no, I'm just got a pain. I ended up doing more damage to myself, and then I couldn't even lift weights, and that's really broke my heart. And if you know me, you know my pain. But denial is a funny thing. Psychologists tell us that denial is one of the very first defense mechanisms that we develop in our early childhood. They say the reason that we develop this defense mechanism is so we can escape the pain of reality. A definition that I really loved about denial is it says that denial is refusal to admit the truth or reality of something. Psychologists tell us that being in denial is bad. It's not a good thing. But they say the thing that's worse than being in denial is staying in denial. Many of us have friends that have addiction issues, and we see the self-harm that they bring to themselves because they refuse to accept the reality that there is really an issue going on. But might I suggest that many of us are in denial today because we refuse to accept reality. We refuse to accept the truth. And I really believe this morning that many of us are in denial about the life that God has for us. We're in denial about a lot of things, but I truly believe we are in denial about the life that God has for us. I know this because many of us are struggling and we're in a place of discontent while our souls are crying out for more. We're longing for more, but we have not stepped in to the life that God has for us because we refuse to accept the reality and the truth that God has for us. Then being in denial is dangerous. But what's even more dangerous is staying in denial. Denial isn't a new thing. It's been going on for all of humanity, honestly. And anytime you've seen anybody great do anything in history or even in the Bible, you see they often wrestle with this idea of denial, being in denial. And in the context of the Bible, before anybody is called into greatness, you see that they are in denial about the life that God has called them to live. They often push it off. They refuse the fact that God is speaking life into them. They would rather live in their destructive area than accept the fact that God is calling them to a greater life, a life abundantly. But oftentimes in history, we see people wrestle with denial, and I think a very good example of this is Jeremiah. So if you could open up your Bibles with me to Jeremiah chapter 4. I know y'all are questioning me. He goes, when is he going to open the Bible? I brought my real Bible. I know Vernon's watching. Vernon, you don't ever bring your real Bible. Hey, Jeremiah chapter 1. We're going to start at verse 4. If you don't got your phone Bible, if you don't got good cell phone service in here, we got our own Bibles over here. They're extra large. We ordered them just for you. Jeremiah chapter 1. In verse 4 it says, "The word of the Lord came to me, saying, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. This is Jeremiah's response. This is where it gets juicy. Jeremiah says, "Alas, sovereign Lord, I said, I do not know how to speak. I am too young." But the Lord said to me, "Do not say I am too young. You must go to everyone I send you to and say whatever I command you. Do not be afraid of them, for I am with you and will rescue you, declares the Lord." Hey, the title of my message today is Caught in Denial. Y'all say that with me? Can you say caught in denial? Say caught in denial. One more time. Caught in denial. If we're telling the story of any great human, we wouldn't think that it would start off with somebody pushing off excuses. Saying, "I'm not, no, don't pick me. Don't call on me. Don't choose me." If we were telling the story of someone great in history, we often wouldn't tell the place where they refused their greatness. We would miss out that piece. But that's exactly what Jeremiah does. Jeremiah, if you looked in verse 5, Jeremiah pulls a Kanye on God. He goes, "Hold on, God. I'm going to let you finish in a minute." God said, "I formed you in your womb. I have called you to be a great prophet." Jeremiah says, "Hold on. I'm going to let you finish in a minute, God. I'm too young. I can't speak." And I find it hard to believe that Jeremiah couldn't speak. You want to know how? Glad you asked. Because it says, "I said to God, I don't know how to speak." How are you going to tell God you don't know how to speak? I said I don't know how to speak, but you're speaking right now. And I really don't believe it wasn't that Jeremiah couldn't speak. I believe that he believed his words weren't worthy enough to be spoken. And many of us aren't acting because we believe that we aren't worthy enough. But God said, "Look, I never talked about you being qualified. I just said I got a mission for you." So many of us are sitting on the sideline because we believe that what we have isn't worth it. But God said, "I never asked you about that. I said I got a mission for you." And God has a mission for everybody in y'all's lives today. But a lot of us are sitting down because we refuse to accept the mission because we look at what we're qualified to do. And if we look at it, our excuses really make a whole lot of no sense to Jesus. I can't speak. I'm too young. God said, "I didn't tell you you were too young. I said I formed you in your womb. So you're past being formed in the womb, so you qualify." Jeremiah attempts to disqualify himself with two excuses that make no sense. How many of us attempt to disqualify ourselves with excuses that don't make sense? We believe our thoughts above God's thoughts and we automatically cut God off. How many of us cut God off? Say, "I'm going to let you finish in a minute, God, but I don't measure up. I'm going to let you finish in a minute, God, but I don't got what they got. I'm going to let you finish in a minute, God, but I'm not worthy. I'm going to let you finish." How many of us straight up pull a Kanye on Jesus and say, look, you don't know me, Jesus. You don't know what I've done. You don't know where I've been. You don't know what I've got. You don't know my gifts. How many of us straight up say, "God, I'm going to let you finish in a minute, but this is what I got. I got something to tell you." When if you look at the verse, there's no question mark. God doesn't ask Jeremiah, "Are you willing to do this? Or are you worth doing this? Are you worthy enough to do this?" It's a declaration. God has made a declaration of purpose into everyone's life. And instead of receiving that declaration, we cut him off, saying our thoughts are above his thoughts. If Jeremiah would have done a little bit more listening, I believe, he would have heard the piece where God said, "I have formed you in your mother's womb." But he was so quick to being defensive, going back to the fact that we create defense mechanisms at an early age called denial. He was so quick to being defensive that he never heard the fact that God said, "I knitted you in your mother's womb." God knits purpose in our DNA at creation. that every person here in this room, purpose was woven into your DNA the moment that God formed you in your mother's womb. And the fact that you aren't worthy or disqualified doesn't separate you from your purpose. And your age doesn't separate you from your purpose. Because he says, I formed you in your mother's womb. I placed purpose inside your DNA way before you were born. So if you're 12 years old, 1 year old, 3 years old, you got purpose in your DNA. If you're 70 years old, you got purpose in your DNA. God didn't just create you and leave out purpose, but he put purpose deep inside your soul. And he put purpose deep inside Jeremiah's soul. He said, look, I know you, I created you, I've called you, and this is attached to who you are. You cannot do anything to separate you from the purpose that God has put in your life. God wove purpose down into deep into the inside of Jeremiah. But God gently brushes off the fact that Jeremiah cuts him off. And he speaks back into his life. The words that you decide to believe will dictate the life that you live. The words that you decide to believe will dictate the life that you live. Many of us are cutting God off and believing our words above his words. We are caught in denial. Say, caught in denial. After Jeremiah cuts God off, God says a couple, I'm thinking, really important things in verse 8. He says, do not be afraid. I am with you and will rescue you. And we've all heard that the number one most quoted phrase, the number one most biggest commandment in the Bible is when Jesus says or when God says, do not be afraid. And what I've learned about when God says, do not be afraid, that means you have every reason to be afraid. Every reason to fear. Fear is a reality. Let's be honest. We cannot ignore it. We can be like, God, look, you said I have no reason to fear, but fear is very present. So it tells me that Jeremiah was afraid of his purpose. So if you're afraid of the life that God has called you to live, you're not alone. And if we're living a life that's connected to God, it's going to bring fear, because how can a fallible human being connect to an infallible God to do a purpose much greater than themselves? That's going to be scary. That's going to be scary. And if it's not scary, your vision and your dream doesn't match the God that I know, because the God that I know created the heavens and the earth with a breath. And the fact that he calls you, the fact that he speaks to you, the fact that he talks to you, that's scary. The fact that he's calling you into more, that's scary. So when God says, do not be afraid, it means we have every reason to be afraid. Fear is a reality. But do not let that fear of uncertainty keep you from stepping into the life that God has called you to live. Because fear will keep you boxed in from the life that God has called you to live. And I believe today that now is the time of the day for us is, the time now is for us to lean into that uncertainty, to lean into that fear, to take a step towards Jesus, saying, I'm going to believe your thoughts above my thoughts. I'm going to believe what you have to say about my future and my destiny and my purpose and the life that you called me to live way above my own thoughts. Because if we refuse to step into the life that God has called us to step into, we will maintain a life of mediocrity and discontent. Because how can you fulfill your greatest potential if you refuse to connect with the one who created you? Jeremiah was in a place where he would have to decide, What narrative for my life am I going to believe? Am I going to write the script to my own life? Or am I going to let God write the script to my own life? What thoughts am I going to think? Whose story am I going to lean on? Am I going to rely on my words? Or am I going to rely on God's words? Who will you let write the story to your life? What narrative will you believe? What script will you believe? Will you lean into faith? Will you lean into Jesus, believing that he is the one who is going to write the best story for you? Full of uncertainty, yes. Full of fear, yes. He doesn't promise the absence of fear. He doesn't promise the absence of uncertainty. He says, I promise you I will be with you and I will rescue you. The fact that he has to rescue us means we're going to be in a place where we're going to need to be rescued. Who will you let write the script to your life? What narrative will you believe? Will you let God's words write your script? Or will you let your words write the script, leading to a place of mediocrity and discontent? Many of us have continually been discontent and discouraged because we've been writing the story to our own life. We've been allowing our own thoughts to narrate what direction we're moving in. I came to faith at the age of 19 through a series of unfortunate events, but I call it, a series of fortunate events now. At the age of 19, I was arrested. A couple charges. One of the charges was armed robbery. But really, that was just the beginning of the end. When I was sitting in jail at the age of 19, Richmond City Jail, 2011, what led me there, if you're curious, was a series of drug addictions that started at the age of 12. I started partying when I was 12. Started doing all the fun stuff that I thought was, cool at the time. And it got to a point to where I believed that God created me for one purpose. And this is the purpose that I believed, and I really believed it. I believed that God created me for the purpose to show everyone else how not to live. I go, God, you created me to be a mess up. You created me to be a mistake. You created me to not be qualified. You created me to be in jail. You created me to be strung out on drugs. You created me for this. And I really believed him. I thought, I told myself that I would never change. I told myself that I'll be a drug addict for the rest of my life. I told myself that someone's got to be the criminal, so I'm going to be the criminal. I told myself that this is the shoes that God put me in. I'm here for a reason. By the age of 18, I overdosed 3 times, went to several different jails, several different rehabs. When most of my friends were graduating college, I was graduating out of rehab, and I was excited. 19 years old, laying in jail, telling myself how much I deserved it. You ever been so tired, you're like, I deserve this consequence. This is how my life sums up. So the script in my mind was, you're a drug addict. You're never going to change. You're probably going to be dead before you're 30. Probably be in jail for the rest of your life if you don't die before you're 30. I told myself it was okay because someone had to do it, and I believed it. But when I was laying in this cell, in this bunk, hopeless, full of discontent, a life lower than mediocrity, I had nothing to my name except for what the city of Richmond gave me, which ain't a whole lot. Hot and 3 cots in a hot. And something touched me in that moment, not physically because that would be a fight, but spiritually. And it said, you need help. It said, you need help. I go, and I started talking back. I go, I don't have no help. I talked to my lawyer, and my lawyer said, you deserve to be in jail. I talked to my family hung up the phone. I go, what do you mean I need help? No one's helping me. There's nothing I can do. I deserve this. And so I really believe that's one of the first prayers I ever prayed. I said, okay, well, help me. I don't know who I was talking to. I have no idea. I said, help. And I felt a cry from my soul that said, help. I didn't have the right words to say. I didn't know the Christian lingo. I didn't know Jesus, Jehovah, God, Rapha. I didn't know none of that. I just said, help. You know, some of the best prayer you can pray is just help me. Just help. And as I'm laying there, I just go, help, whatever. And I didn't have a bond or anything at the time. And then all of a sudden, miraculously, I was eating chow. And they go, Gary, bond. And I go, is there another Gary in here? Because it ain't me. They told me I was denied bond like 4 times, and that's a big deal. And so I found out that my parents had reached out to a local church and got contact with somebody who was willing to bond me out and move me in with them. And in the process of living with this pastor and in the process of living at this church, I began to realize the life that I lived didn't have to be based on the narrative that I told myself, but there was a God that created me who had a greater narrative for me. And in the process of believing that narrative, I began to find hope in myself and hope in Jesus. I began to find that purpose was inside of me, that I wasn't just a drug addict, that I wasn't just a criminal, that I wasn't just a mess up, that I wasn't a mistake, that I wasn't somebody whose purpose was to show people how not to live, but I was somebody who was created by the creator of the universe, who put purpose inside my DNA to reach somebody for him. So I began to believe in someone's narrative bigger than myself. I began to step into faith. I was uncertain, but I stepped. I was uncertain, but I moved. I said, my narrative ain't been good enough for me. Let me try out Jesus. I want to start believing his narrative for my life. So I don't know where you are in life right now, but it's not too late to start believing the narrative that God has for you. That was 2011. It's 2018 now. I ain't been back to jail. I ain't been back on drugs. Serving Jesus. Sometimes people will call me unqualified because I got a felony, but Jesus qualified me. He made a way. Sometimes Jesus has this way of just looking at your mistakes and says, I'm going to use that. I'm going to use you. You think you're unqualified, but I put the purpose in your DNA way before you got that felony. That felony does not remove your purpose. Your mistakes does not remove your purpose. Jesus put that purpose deep inside your belly before you were born. No mistake, no bad choice, no bad thought could ever get rid of the purpose that Jesus has placed inside your life. I really believe that today's the day that we step into the life that Jesus has for us. That we believe his narrative over our narrative. Because when you believe in his narrative in spite of uncertainty, in spite of fear, you will step into the best life you can live, because you will step into a life with Jesus. Can we stand all across the room? Every head bow, every eye closed. I truly believe that in this room today, there are many people that have been believing their own narrative. And as a result of believing their own narrative, they've been living a life of mediocrity and discontent. I believe in this room there are people who are tired of trying to write the story to their life, when God is trying to write the story to our life. So with every head bowed and every eye closed, if you believe that today is your moment to step into faith and to lean into faith, declaring that you want Jesus to be the narrator to your life, that you will believe his words in spite of uncertainty, in spite of fear. My ask for you is just to throw your hand in the air. Just a declaration saying, I'm leaning into Jesus. I'm leaning into faith. I'm leaning into his words. God, we thank you. We thank you for being the narrator to our life. We thank you for putting purpose into our soul, now allowing nothing to separate us from our purpose that you placed in us. We thank you for every hand that is in the air, God. We thank you for every step of faith that is being taken in this room today, deciding they're going to believe your words above our words, your words above our thoughts. God, we're sorry for cutting you off. We're sorry, Jesus. We thank you for gently continuing to speak into our life in spite of us cutting you off. God, I thank you for every hand in the air that says they want to step into the life that you've called them to step into, and to stepping into faith. Now, Jesus, I pray that you surround them with people that can pour into their faith. Surround them with people who can pour hope into them. Surround them with people who can build them up and empower them. We love you, Lord. We thank you for all the great things you're doing. In your heavenly name we pray. Amen. Come on, church, lift up a shout of praise if you believe it in the house.